Hello, and welcome to the video version of the Left of Greg podcast. I'm Brian Marin, the host and creator of the show. As always, I will be joined by human behavior expert Mr. Greg Williams, who the show is affectionately named after. On the show, we discuss different topics through the lenses of what we call human behavior pattern recognition and analysis. If you'd like to find out more about what that is, please check the links in the episode details and go to our website to learn more. Please don't forget to follow us on social media. The links are also in the episode details, and hit the like and subscribe button to help support our work. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the show. All right, we got the recording in progress warning from Zoom, which means we are ready to go. Greg,
We're live.
We are live.
We're live.
We're not live. We're recording.
Exactly. But we're all alive, so
We are
technically.
alive, thankfully, going into this holiday break. Alana, first, thank you so much for coming on. Greg and I are excited to have you on the show.
Well,
Very
thank you for
excited.
having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so you've got an interesting perspective, an interesting background, and an interesting kind of role that you've kind of assumed and taken the ball and running with based on your life experiences. I'll let you describe that here in a second, but just to our listeners, this is a little bit different type of guest that we've ever had on before, and since we're always talking about behavior, that's what you're going to be talking about. You take it from a different perspective, which is good. I want to have a different perspective on the show. One, being a female. We've had other female guests before, but the women who listen to our show, it's a lot smaller than the amount of men who listen to the show. However, the women who do listen to our show are like much better at reaching out and saying like, hey, I really like this, or hey, I love hearing you guys talk about that. And they brought up different relationship stuff before, which is nowhere near my area of expertise. But
Amen.
We deal in predictive analysis. So what we'd like to kind of pick up from you today is some concepts, maybe some indicators, some things, so that I'm sitting here listening to this podcast going, holy crap, Alana's talking about one of my buddies here. Maybe I can get involved here. Maybe there's something I need to know. So with that, we'll just go ahead and jump in and talk about what you do. So I'm going to let you tell me what you do, right?
Okay.
And where that came from, I guess. It's kind of open-ended, so I'll let you form it because you're going to do a better job than me trying to summarize everything I've learned about you from this research and our phone call. So,
All right. So I am a certified high conflict divorce and child custody consultant. Now that's a lot of words. So what I do is I support people in high conflict legal battles. It's typically people that are battling narcissists. So when you're battling a narcissist in a legal concept, I guess so to call it, it's very difficult because they don't want to negotiate or collaborate with you because they want to continue to control you. And when you leave the relationship, they try to control you through your children. So it's a very contentious battle. They like to run up your legal fees. We call that legal abuse. They don't want to pay you spousal support if you're someone that wasn't working during the marriage. We call that financial abuse. So there's all these things you go through, we categorize as post-separation abuse when you're in the process of divorcing a narcissist.
okay,
That's great.
And this is exactly why I threw to you, because that was way better than I could have done.
And Brian, what I want to do is throw in, just for anybody that's listening, psychological definition. Look, there's a whole bunch of different clinical definitions of narcissism and historical perspective. The idea here is what we're talking about is somebody that's selfish, has an aggrandized sense of entitlement, a lack of empathy and sympathy, which we can talk about in a moment, constant need for admiration, and the
Attention.
idea. Yeah, exactly. The idea, Brian, is we both
Greg,
Brian and I shared. Yeah.
Greg, I think you were just kind of slightly describing yourself there. Do I need to?
Yeah, exactly.
Just constant need for attention.
Well,
You have all the empathy in the world, but you do have a lot also
need the sympathy,
attention.
but I have a tremendous amount of empathy. No, but what I wanted to showcase here is that Brian and I aren't subject matter experts from the female point of view.
Right.
But I will tell you that we were involved in a corporate situation surrounded by narcissists, like a vampire movie. You couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting one, and that the lack of perspective, the lack of being able to put yourself in another person's shoes or understand where their feelings are coming from. So we constantly talk about that past relationship as a contentious divorce. And what I love as well is based on our experience, hostage negotiation or kinetic combat, high conflict personality types, we completely get that as well. The extreme behavior swings, intense emotions, all or nothing, all in all the time. I mean, we're talking about all our friends right here. The preoccupation with absolutely that anything has happened is not their fault. It's constantly putting the blame on somebody else. So, Brian, I wanted to make sure that we understood that your perspective doesn't have to just be from a child custody battle. It can be from a relationship with your parents. It can be from a relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend. You just happen to specialize in those things that lead to litigants that are contemplating or involved in a divorce. Is that correct?
That's correct. Okay. Yes.
Yeah,
and how so, did we need to know how you got into that.
Yeah, this is like
because that's a bad story coming.
It's the holiday season, so just by timing, this kind of worked out to be a great one for folks with those family members, relationships, this, that, everything. So, how did you get in this line of work, Alana?
So unfortunately for me, I was married to a narcissist, and when I say narcissist, it was someone with narcissistic personality disorder, actually shortened down to NPD, for 16 years. And once I went into that divorce process, I went into the post-separation abuse phase. So my ex-husband took me to court for child custody of my younger two children because my daughter refused to spend time with him. So he cited parental alienation claims, which is very typical of a narcissist. When they take you to court for child custody, they cite parental alienation. And that's how my battle began.
So
well, first of all, 16 years. People, you have to understand that if you're in anything for 16 years, you lose the ability to see the situation you're in. You're constantly aware of the situation, but you get what I'm trying to say. And NPD, remember, NPD is a mental disorder when it's a personality disorder. It's something that a doctor, a psychologist, a psychopatist comes in and says, this is what you have based on your behavior, your cognition, your experiences. So that's telling. And you were there for 16 years.
Yes.
What was I need to know, what was the line? Where was it? This is it. We've got to go.
He physically assaulted my 19-year-old son. Wow. And I said, okay, we've escalated to physical abuse. It's not just me taking the mental hits. You're actually attacking my son, and I've got to protect my kids and get out.
Wow, that's so smart.
That's one that's amazing that you did that, because like Greg said, over time like that, the longer that goes on, the longer you endure, the longer you get used to it, the less likely you are to get out of those situations, which is a lot of people who don't understand that stuff, who've never seen it. Greg and I have experienced it in different areas. I'm trying to actually avoid in this conversation some personal stuff, because people who will listen to it will know who I'm talking about, and I don't want to do that. But the idea is
and Alana will charge you, because
that was
going to get specific. He's going to send you a bill. I would.
When I went to your website, look at the consulting, I was like, okay, all right. How do I get her on the podcast without having her charge me?
Because there's no podcast. Brian just wants to ask you a question.
That was my voice that said it's now recording. So. No, but to get out of that, it's very difficult. And a lot of guys, a lot of men don't realize, people who aren't narcissists, who are just normal or whatever, they see relationship, things happen and people argue, because arguments are normal in a relationship. There's a difference between arguing and abuse, right? And my thing is psychological and emotional abuse is just as bad, if not worse sometimes, than physical abuse, right? I mean, it's all bad, but people don't understand how powerful and controlling of a factor that is. And then again, how long it takes to kind of wind that back and understand from the victim's perspective, from your perspective, to go through and fix that, almost to go back and recognize, and then go, holy crap, this started way back here. I didn't even know. I was being sort of groomed this entire time. So
let me throw that too, Brian, the grooming. grooming is very important. And Alana, one of the things that I know from running into king size narcissists, we happen to run it like when lives are measured in nanoseconds and people are dying in combat, everybody that's of a narcissistic personality disorder takes one step forward. You can see it almost immediately on a battle space, right? And the problem is they're good looking. They got a lot of charisma. They're charming. They're very confident, and they can talk shit like nobody else in the world and get people to believe their side of almost any story. That's why sometimes narcissists go on you have a certain type of narcissist that can be a serial killer or so explain how, because it's easy to have 16 years go by and all of a sudden have to have a cataclysmic event like that. But how did you get roped in? I bet things were nice.
Yeah. What were all those
right?
looking back now that you go,
right.
Everything you saw from day one, right?
Yes. And it wasn't until I left the relationship and I started looking at day one that I saw that grooming process that you're referring to. Yes. So we actually call it the narcissistic abuse cycle.
Okay.
And the very first phase of that is love bombing. So that's when the narcissist gives you unlimited attention. They shower you with gifts. They elevate you onto this pedestal and they become everything you've ever wanted in a partner. Now, how do they know what you want in a partner? They collect information from you in the first stages of dating on things that you want in your partner. So they're constantly questioning you. And you're just thinking that you're both getting to know one another. But if you really look at the questioning, you're doing more answering than you're asking questions. And the narcissist is just sitting there collecting information. So from my perspective, he was my soulmate, right? He liked the same type of music I liked. He liked the same movies. Like, he was perfect. And I said, I will never meet anyone this perfect than this guy right here. And our first date, I knew then, I said, I'm going to marry this man. And I ended up marrying him.
So
psychological manipulation. From hello.
So this is how we would use some terms to almost describe some of that, because Greg brought up the term psychological manipulation, and that's what he was doing. Now, and he had a high level of organization, right? So in order to do this stuff, you have to be highly organized. You can't be sloppy, but it's not often what people think. Like, he's not sitting at home making charts and graphs and writing things out, right? It's naturally ingrained because of whatever happened to him growing up and however he was treated or whatever environment and biological reasons there were, right? He had to learn how to do that. And he learned over time that was an effective way to get what he wanted out of people, right?
Correct.
And so you'll see that. So we see that in all kinds of different areas that we've been in. So it just, when people think like, it's not like they're taking notes on their phone to everything you're saying.
No,
it's something that happens.
They're taking mental notes.
And what we look at is almost like, you say, does this pass the smell test? Like you said, you went on that first date, you happen to have like everything in common and we like the same stuff. Like me, I'm like, okay, sounds a little too good to be true. Right. But that shows the type of person you are, for one, because that means you're just like my wife, like you want to see the good in people, right?
Yes.
So guess what? We see what we want to see, we believe what we want to believe, we hear what we want to hear. So now you've built this up internally, and this is normal human behavior. This is what a good person does. They go, oh, okay, oh my God, this is great. Like you're everything that I've been
everything
looking for.
I wanted. Yes.
It's all right here. And because you're open and honest, right? It's very easy for that person who isn't to just mirror what you need or what you want, or there's no like, it's like the people like, oh, like, no, we never get in arguments. I was like, that's not good, man. Like, people are supposed to argue.
And my ex actually said that. He said that early on. I was like, hey, I want to learn how to communicate so that when we have an argument, we're communicating effectively. And he said, we will never get into an argument.
There you go. So let me give you a perspective that well, and you're a subject matter expert. So I'll give you the perspective from 28 years of law enforcement dealing with violent domestic abuse, right? So the female, and we're talking about a relationship between males and females. It can be anything. It can be female, female, male, male. I don't care. We're agnostic to that. But generally, a female in this type of a relationship, females are much quicker on the get than a male in the same situation. So I'll give you just an example that was carried over time and time again. The female would close the accounts, change the locks on the door, already be at the Ronald McDonald House, have enlisted the aid of a lawyer, told all her friends about the things, had the bags packed. The guy is going, wait a minute, we're fighting? You're leaving me? What's going on? And that thing is normal. What you're talking about is he's choreographing relationship. He's planning and orchestrating it. It's just such a, it seems like the perfect word for it. And how did he keep you because I guarantee there were times where you're like, this is going, we've got to stop this. How did he keep bringing you back? Because I think that's important, Brian. I think one of the things that Alana, what you bring is somebody out there that's listening to our podcast is going, wow, this could be me. What were the depths of the manipulation that he was willing to go to?
So taking me through this cycle. So after the love bombing, it dies out. You go into devalue, which is where they start to just subtly put you down.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But you realize it, but you don't realize it. They call it cognitive dissonance because you're like, hey, he was a great guy in the beginning. Like, he's not really putting me down. He didn't mean that. So you're trying to rationalize in your mind what you're going through, right? And then they get to the discard where they found another supply or they just want to get rid of you. And then the Hoover stage comes in like a Hoover vacuum. They try to suck you back into the relationship where they start the love bombing stage all over again. So you see that person that you initially fell in love with that you hadn't seen, in months or years at that point. And so you just keep going through the cycle.
Yeah. And
it's terrible.
And again, it's so easy. I still hear people like, oh, how do you get wrapped up in that? How do you not know? It's like, man, when it's right in front of you, you never see it. And that's the hardest thing to do. And you don't even see your own behavior sometimes because, it's about adaptation, change blindness, right? Slow changes over time. Your brain does not notice. You're not primed to do that. It looks for threats that are, oh my God, it's the grizzly bear. I need to run, right? Oh my God. So you don't look for those little things, a little thing here and there, a little thing here and there. Next thing you know, it's a 10 years later or 15 years later. And then you've gone, what the hell just happened? And And that's where we come in because that happens. That's the same thing that happens with a school shooter. That's the same thing that happens with the insider threat, the terrorist, the insurgent. Like it's the same behavior that builds over time. So what we specialize in is all that stuff. Here are some indicators. You need to look for what we call incongruence, right? Now, meaning I don't know what it's going to be. Maybe there's incongruent behavior here because the guy's a narcissist and he's trying to manipulate me, or they're cheating on me, or they're cheating on their taxes. Like, I don't know what you're going to find.
Right.
We look for incongruence. So do you have any examples of anywhere in that cycle of what you would maybe consider? Because I know that's our term I'm throwing on you. Maybe you don't use that, but
I call it red flags.
Red flags, exactly. So that's a common term, right? So what are some of those that you've seen from your experience?
So the very first red flag that I missed was he pushed my boundaries. Okay. He's 6 years younger than me. So one of the first things I said to him in the beginning was, I'm not interested in dating one 6 years younger than me. We're in two different stages of our lives. I'd prefer to date someone closer to my age. Mm-hmm. He said, I understand that. Okay. But then he continued to pursue me relentlessly after I said that. So you pushed my boundary until I gave in.
Right.
Completely missed it. All right. Once he got me in there, he subtly started changing things. So 2 weeks before our marriage, he got upset because I didn't do something that he wanted me to do. And he just blew up. Okay. Caught me completely off guard. I wasn't expecting it. I said, if this is how our relationship is going to be when we get married, I don't want to get married. And he flipped back into the loving phase, the loving mask. And he's like, very apologetic. I apologize. I would never do this again. So I accept the apology, and my marriage ended up being even worse than that first incident. So that was another red flag that I missed.
No,
and Brian, let's go back for
go
just
ahead.
a second.
Yep. Yeah.
First of all, let's talk cognitive dissonance. So I'll give you a quick, for everybody that's listening, we're going to make sure that we street definition so you're able to use cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a cognitive illusion. It's where your brain is clouded by the events based on other incoming novel information that you haven't dealt with in this situation. And the reason it's harder in this situation is because you're at home. It's your house. You parked in the driveway. You came up and used your key. So you're more likely to miss it. And I'll give you an example of that. A stolen car caper from 40 years ago. A guy wakes up in the middle of the night, looks around, knows something's wrong. Cognitive dissonance. Something is amiss. There's something going on. And he hears his car. And he hears somebody starting to, trying to crank his car over. And he goes, hey, you got to pump it. And the guy pumps it and drives away with his car. He stole his car. Yeah. But the idea was the guy missed the fact that the stolen car was in progress because it was at his home. He was in his bedroom. So what you've got is you've got these hooks that come with cognitive dissonance. So the idea that it's a couple of weeks before the wedding. So now we've got the carrot and the stick that turns into the stick and the stick. Yeah, okay. Well, now we're going to fight. So what are we going to do? We're going to abandon the marriage. Look what you're doing to me. And then we flip the script again and say, oh, baby, you just got to give me that one more chance, man. It was the stress of the wedding coming on. Does that sound familiar? I mean,
yes.
Those are the types of things that, and boundary people that have control issues on boundaries. First, I learn my boundaries. Then I test my boundaries. And finally, I push my boundaries. And if you're not caught at each one of those stages, if it's not concrete,
Greg, give a real quick your example of that. I'm going to say because that's a normal way humans develop of how we learn. So you have like the kid example is perfect.
Brian.
Yes.
Brian Patrick Marin. You better come over here right now. Yeah. But I didn't want people to use your credit card for Christmas. But now you're just going to get inundated. But the idea is that the first couple of times that I try to get your attention, that I'm not going to act on it. So that means that you've already had the opportunity to understand what the boundaries are. And so until I use your full name and stand up and start pointing, you're not going to budge. And remember, that is ingrained like a groove in a record. And if you're not old enough to know what that means, it's an electrochemical neurotransmitter in your brain that triggers on certain emotions. So the dissonance makes you stupid. Dissonance is like seeing an oasis on the highway, and there's no oasis there. It's just hot asphalt, but you fall for it over and over again.
And over again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cognitive dissonance is a repeated offense of the brain. Yeah.
Correct.
And so one of the things I always focus on with people in identifying this, because you can't you can come in, Alana, after what you've experienced and studied and developed and identify this stuff and make some sort of diagnosis, right? But the average person can't, right? Or I don't mean average person, like average is just you, if you don't have any experience in it, it's like, what am I supposed to look for? And I always boil things down to, people focus too much on what people say. So when one of the things that we get into is we teach a little bit of like biometric responses and physiological responses and how that affects your body language and what that means. So there's all different studies and estimates and stuff, but one of the ones that I really like because it highlights how unimportant the words are is that, it's something that like 80% or something, or 70% of communication is, your body language, another
nonverbals.
Nonverbal stuff, right? So another, 10 or 15% is, the physiological reaction that you're having that the other person's picking up on. They're just not really consciously aware of it. And then you get into like the rest of it is like the pitch, tone, and inflection of your voice. And then you finally get down to it's like less than 10% are the actual words, right? Less than 10% are the actual words coming out of your mouth. But we always focus on, well, he said this or she said this. And he said, it's like, yeah, but what did he do? So what Greg too had mentioned about the cognitive dissonance is, if the cognitive dissonance, another one example is just, you can say everything you want in the world, but what is it that you do? And if there is some dissonance there, right, there's what you're doing is not matching up with what you're saying.
Correct.
That's incongruent.
Here we are again, right?
Yeah.
And you're looking at it going, oh my gosh, it's the broken cycle. I'm back here again. How did I get back here? And I know we've all had that situation, right?
Right. And you're constantly changing yourself, right? So he's constantly telling me I'm the problem. So I'm like, oh, well, let me fix that. So then I won't be the problem anymore, because I'm trying to get back that man that I met and dated in those early stages.
That margin way over here, where he was the perfect one. Yeah.
Yes.
So on that, so how is it then? How did you learn to deal with this, right? Because what is it that, I mean, you have this whole business out, you have a service you provide, and I think it's wonderful, because I know there's a lot of women out there who don't understand or know what to do or what they're dealing with or how to deal with it. That like, if everyone goes like, you're a divorce consultant, like what the heck? I'm like, oh, if you know anything about divorce, like I fully see that this is 100% necessary for people, but what is it that you learn to do to deal with it? Like, how did you start drawing lines in the sand? What did you have to do? What did that look like? What did that feel like?
So even though I somewhat woke up when I saw him physically assault my son, I still did not realize that I had been in an abusive marriage. I knew that I had been through something bad, but I didn't realize it was abusive. So it wasn't until I actually got out of the home that I started researching and reading up on what I experienced and learned what I was dealing with. Even though a marriage counselor had told me years prior, hey, your husband's a narcissist, I didn't believe her, because the term gets thrown around so much. Like, he wasn't my definition of a narcissist.
Right.
But that's exactly what he is when you look at all the literature. So that's when I learned I had been in an abusive situation. I started reading up on it, and then I started learning how to combat that behavior. Because those people, I asked my therapist this, I'm like, why do they all act the same? And she said, it's like having a cold. We all exhibit the same symptoms. So once you know what those symptoms are, you know how to treat those symptoms. And that's what I learned how to do. And that's what I teach my clients.
No, and that's, that this is why I kind of glammed on a lot of what you're talking about, is because, we're the same thing, is like, there's a narrow bandwidth of predatory behavior. It's a narrow bandwidth. It's a finite data set. You can put a name on it. You can learn how to identify it. Like we use terms like, mission focus and predatory looks. Like you can pick out a guy who's about to go shoot up a school or blow himself up out of a crowd. You can. This is a distinct look that they have. It's a physiological response. They can't hide it even if they tried, right? They're so mission focused. Well, it's not unlike that in these situations too with people. And one of the things you talked a little bit about boundaries and learning how to deal with it, because I had a situation before where a friend had asked me, she brought something up, and I'm trying to keep it super vague, but and said, hey, this is what's going on. And I had to say the same thing. I said, you're in an abusive relationship and you are at the point where this is restraining order point. And she's, no, he would never do this. I go,
don't
you need to stop
that.
right now. I go, you need to teach him how you want to be treated. So you need to tell him right now that if you contact me again, I'm calling the police and I'm getting a restraining order. Now, in that case, that was it. He shut down, was like, whoa, I don't want nothing to do with that. But she set that boundary and he respected that boundary. So it stopped, but other people might not. So
that's correct.
The idea is identifying it and dealing with that. Now, very difficult to do, especially in a situation, you're married to someone, maybe you're at home raising the kids while he's working, you don't have anything to go on here. You're kind of feel like that's a whole different dynamic.
Correct.
And so what else do you notice about, in all these cases that you've studied and all the help that you do in your own, what is it outside the relationship that other people can identify? Right. So like, I'm buddies with your ex-husband. Like, what do I need to look for, or what do I know? What would I see? Have you seen anything like that could help?
Yes. So I actually give tips for friends and family in my book as well. So from the buddy perspective, is he constantly calling his girlfriend or his wife? Is he constantly texting her? When he's with you, he's supposed to be spending time with you, but is he more focused on what his partner is doing at that time? That's a red flag. Okay. Is he subtly controlling his partner, when they're together? And you can look at the partners, like for me, for example, look at my body language. do I seem like I'm walking on eggshells when I'm with my partner? You know, do I seem very concerned with what he's doing or how he's looking at me at the time, and then trying to change my behavior, you know, to fit his? So body language, the sense of control, the person feels like they're being controlled, so they're trying to conform to the person. It's different things like that you could look out for.
No,
And-
because that was one of the things that you brought up with when you gave your story of like your first date and first being with that person. That's a guy I used to be friends with. I now know, looking back, like that's what he used to be. And I was just like, wow, like he's really in love with this chick. He's really into her. Like that's crazy. Like, you know, I'm happy for you, right? You know, and then I didn't know what was going on when they were together. I didn't know that, like,
right. No one does.
And then
Yeah.
what did always turn into when things went bad? Oh, she's this, she's that, and like,
Yes.
so obviously, then once I saw the repeated behavior, I was like, there's a common denominator in all of this,
Yes.
and that's you, buddy. But we're no longer friends since then. But it's one of those things that, you know, at first glance, you know, I assume he's my buddy. I assume the best out of him. I want to think the best of our friends, and you don't always know. And my whole thing is, you know, we're never hyper vigilant about people, but when someone comes up to me and says, hey, do you ever think this person, my answer is usually, yeah, that could happen. And they're like, wait, you really think this person could be like that? I go, yeah, I don't know them well enough. Like, yeah, but you see them every day in here. I go, yeah, in a certain context for an hour a day. Like, I don't know anything outside of that.
That's right.
We have a lot of different cognition biases for that reason, that you know, someone is nice to us, they must be a nice person. Well,
that's right.
You know,
not true.
Jeffrey Dahmer was nice to a lot of people, not so much the people he killed, you know.
In 8, yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yes. I'm sorry, Greg. I know you had something else you wanted to ask her.
First of all, I want to make sure that everybody that's tuned in knows. Listen, Brian's going to put up all the information on how to get a hold of Alana, information about our website and book, so you can go and do the research that you want. Brian, what I was thinking is Christmas and New Year's is the perfect time to conduct a limited objective experiment. When you're around people, sit back, have a cocktail, relax, and watch. And what you'll notice, watch the kids when the grandma that pinches too hard comes into the room. Watch if you've got an Uncle Paul in your family that gets too close to the kids. Watch the kids coalesce in one area to try to stay away from them or find something else to do. That type of behavior is what we're talking about. And the great thing about talking about a high conflict personality disorder, a lack of too much sympathy and a lack of empathy, we could go and assign homework to the people listening. One, great case, Eileen Warnos out of Florida. Okay. Complete sympathy, lack of empathy, murderer, but she was so cool, she was so narcissistic that the people around her loved her. Even the people that were investigating for the homicide were like, oh, Eileen. And she's like, I know, Your Honor. I mean, you have to get into the case to read the transcript, but it's a great case study and how somebody did. Bundy's another one. Family annihilators. You got people that are all in all the time. And what they're thinking is it's all or nothing. So I'm telling you right now, if you leave me, I'm killing everybody in the house. And then I'm going to kill myself, because if I can't have you, nobody else is going to have you. And folks, we listen to those threats and we don't think there's substance there. That's cognitive dissonance. There's always substance. When somebody is balancing and somebody is saying, you do this or else. And I'm not talking about a mom or a dad or a parental figure with a kid. Kids need our guidance. You know, kids need those boundaries. But I'm telling you, in a relationship that we're discussing and that you've made your business out of counseling people on, when you hear that type, words hurt, and words are gonna, you know, people that have been abused will abuse, people that have been hit will hit, and if we forget just those basics, Brian, and Alana, I know that when clients come to you, you probably have to hear your story over and over. Is that true?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
It's my story over and over. Sometimes it's triggering. Sometimes I can handle it. But yes, it is my exact story. It's just two different people. But yes.
Yeah, that's got to be tough. And Brian, what I mean by this sympathy, empathy, all of the people that will go down the road to have this disorder and try to manipulate others. And remember, we're talking psychological manipulation. You're changing the players on the risk board to your advantage. That's what we're talking about, manipulate, not pushing or pressing or threatening. They're using their influence to get you to do something. Well, sympathy,
or host of control.
of course, and
Yeah.
control is a great word. So sympathy means that you understand from your own perspective being hurt. And Brian, you do that a lot. When we're in a room, I'll usually come with the empathy, which is my putting myself in some other person's shoes at that time and place. And sometimes it becomes overwhelming. And then you go, hey, I've got a friend that had the, I love that, because what that is you're going through sympathy and empathy. A narcissist can't. A narcissist only understands sympathy from themselves. What you're doing now is hurting me. What you're doing now is not giving me, I need to be the lead in this room. People need to be watching me and how I react. And you should be, standing in my shadow all the time. And it's hard, because if you haven't been trained what to look for, it's just like finding an IED or a sniper in a battle space. If you don't have a basic amount of training, you're going to miss it. And again, cognitive dissonance, and fundamental attribution error, where you're going to assign a characteristic. Well, hey, she's sharp. She married him. He's got to be a good guy. And you know what? Your friends probably thought he was a good guy for 16 or more years.
Right. Until I started opening up. And then when I started saying the things that he was doing, I still actually didn't know I was being abused.
Well,
but their reactions to what I was saying, I was like, oh, is that bad? Like, I'm shocked.
Well, so that this kind of is that's a perfect sort of segue into what I want to talk about, is what you wrote, what your book, the whole, you called it, Was It My Fault? And that's common, right? I hear that a lot, especially from women who are like, what did I do wrong? Where typically a guy's like, someone did something wrong, right? Where a woman will be like, what did I do wrong? So I'm assuming that that's a common thing you see with all of your clients in these situations. So kind of explain a little bit about that and talk about that book and what you mean by Was It My Fault?
In the very beginning and throughout the 16 years, my ex's justification for how he treated me was I was not doing something, or I was causing whatever it is he was doing that was abusive. It's all your fault. I'm treating you this way because of this. You didn't do this, so I did this to you. And that's how my clients come to me as well. They feel like they could have done something differently. They felt like they didn't do enough. And that's why you constantly change, right? So that's why I said cognitive dissonance. I kept trying to change myself and conform to what he wanted so that it wouldn't be my fault. And he could stop saying, I did this because you didn't do this, or you did that, or whatever, to make it my fault. The relationship wasn't going well.
Yeah. And that's, that people, the thing is with these people, with a narcissist we're dealing with, is they're not ever going to accept responsibility. And that's the biggest thing that I've had to deal with someone, where I've said, you have to understand, he is never going to change, right? Or, and is there a possibility for people to change through therapy and want to? Yeah, but you have to want to.
Right. And narcissists can't.
and there's been nothing to demonstrate the fact that he's even tried. So if there's no evidence to support the fact that he's making an effort, that means there's no effort being made, which means it's never going to change. Like that's the biggest thing, is framing that when you have someone like this, that, okay, this is who they are. So I can't control that. This is what they're going to do. How do I deal with that? Because Greg brought up something at the beginning, and it kind of reminded me of someone that we worked with. Do not bring it up anymore, Greg. I don't want to get too far in.
No.
But it's very clear that they bring up points when we're talking about something and turn and make the conversation about them and their accolades.
Yes.
So that's a huge indicator. Right. Now, for what we do, know how to deal with that, massage the situation. And I'm more than happy to make someone think that they're the greatest person in the world if it gets done what I need to get done inside that day, right? Because we have a job to do that we are hired to do. And I'm not going to let one person get in the way of the other 30 people in the room, right?
Yes.
So I can deal with that. But how do you deal with that in a relationship? How do I deal with that if I'm going through this
Right.
divorce process, or beforehand or after? Because it doesn't end. If you got kids and it's still
No, it
going,
doesn't
guess
end.
what? It's never ending.
18 years.
Yeah.
Yes. And the person you're describing sounds like an overt narcissist. So my ex-husband and a lot of the men that I'm dealing with, their ex-wives, they're covert.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
They're
Yeah.
undercover.
So
Wow.
yeah, explain that a little bit about
Yes.
what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, so they are very charismatic and charming to the outside world. They present very well. So when you go to someone and you say this man or this woman is a monster behind closed doors, they can't fathom it in their mind because of how that person presents. We would go to marriage counselors and I'm like hysterically crying, saying he treats me horribly. I can't stand the cycles. I'm actually explaining the narcissistic abuse cycle without even realizing it. And he's calm as a cucumber, saying, oh, I just love my wife and I'm trying to do this and trying to do that and nothing works. And he gets the sympathy. I get, she's the crazy person. And Alana, you just need to do more.
Right. So I'd like to add one more facet to that, Brian, if I can.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about kids as well. And
Wow.
this is going to sound, take it for what I'm saying. Thank God your son was 19 when the abuse occurred rather than 9.
Yeah.
You get what I'm trying to say there. And folks, if you're listening to this broadcast, it's okay to reach out for help. It's okay to ask an expert what they would do in the situation. Why? Because your kid's perspective, if they're kids, if they're young kids, your kid's perspective is this: I want mom and dad to stay together because that's my normal. I don't want to divorce because that means we leave the house. We have to go and do these other things. Kids just want a normal relationship, clinically normal. I don't mean, anything by that. But a kid isn't a good sounding board. Hey, do you think we should do this in that situation? This is for adults. And this is also for the law and for the arbiters of the law. So you need, look, if I was going to go in and negotiate a contract, I go to an expert and I have a lawyer take a look over the paperwork. I would get some help. I would enlist the aid. What I'm not going to do is talk to the 50% of my family and friends that have been divorced. They're not experts on it either.
No.
So you fill a spot, and so there's kids, and kids need that structure, and then there's adults, and adults need that help. You fill a niche market where because of high conflict, you can come in and deliver that calming voice and a structure and an organization to people. And that's the other reason I think Brian and I were so excited to have you on, is because look, when when police get in a scrum, they call a SWAT team. You're the SWAT team for the marriage police. So we appreciate that. We appreciate somebody being the voice of reason in an unreasonable situation.
So,
and I did want to correct. Hold on one second, Brian.
Go
one
ahead.
thing, yeah.
I know where you're going. Yeah.
So, Greg, that was the first time I saw the physical abuse against my son.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. It was actually happening behind the scenes, and I didn't know it. It wasn't until I was going through the divorce process that my son told me, like, hey, this guy had been hurting me since I was like 6 years old.
Yeah, it's horrible.
And I had no idea.
So that's a good point to bring up, is because what does that look like after a divorce? Like, you have kids together, is he likely to treat those kids that same way when he has them? I mean, because that's the big thing here too, is okay, like step one is you fixed your life situation, or you got out of this horrible situation.
So you're not the pawn,
but now what becomes the focal point? Something he can control.
Correct.
So what does that look like with kids involved, right? How does that, what are some of the things that you see that they're going to do?
Right. So we call it domestic violence by proxy. Jeez. And that's when the narcissist goes after your children. They file the child custody case and they try to get, more than likely, full custody of your kids. They typically do not want to do 50-50. Well, they want full custody because they want you to pay them child support, or they want to do 50-50, even though you might be a mother that was a stay-at-home mom and didn't have an income, but they don't want to pay you child support.
Right.
So they're fighting for 50-50. So you're being abused all over again. You're just not with the person anymore. You're just in the divorce process, and they're relentless, right? Because it's all about control and winning. They want to continue to win and control, but they're doing it through legal means. Constant motions. I don't even know how many motions my ex filed against me. It was ridiculous. And I was getting upset with my lawyer because I'm like, how is he allowed to do this?
Right.
But again, family court, it's a business.
Yep.
Every time you file that motion, that lawyer is getting paid.
Yep.
So the whole situation it's just bad for the people that are trying to get out of the abusive situation and then trying to handle it through legal means.
Well, and I would agree too, Brian, that this is a different situation we're talking about. So when you go to the front of the court, or when you go to the court, or when you go to an attorney, they've seen it all, heard it all. It's like, yeah, okay, I got it. Sign here. We'll file this. We'll do that.
Yes.
One, your ex-husband didn't know, or if he knew he was a narcissist, didn't think that his behavior was anything extraordinary. But
Correct.
the court needs to know. That's, again, why you have to have the right kind of person. Like when I don't go to my proctologist and say, hey, my hearing has been, this tinnitus is horrible. You have to go to a specialist in that field, I feel.
Yes. Yeah. And you have to have the right lawyer too. It's not just me to tag along, but a lot of lawyers, they just take your case and they think, oh, it's just another regular divorce situation, but it's not. It really isn't. Like, this person is not going to negotiate at all. They're going to make this very difficult.
Yeah. And
know that if your former husband is on our podcast, he's just dropped off. He's not going to listen anymore. So he lost that one, but that was worth losing. But no, you're exactly right. You need a specialist for a special type of situation like this.
Yes.
Well, so was there anything during this process that you were able to like look at or do or think to go, you know what, if I just focus on this, or like, what was that moment? So you had this realization of this huge thing, right? Oh my God, he just abused my son. And then you find out all this other, it gives you that perspective now to take a step back and go, holy crap. And I know you're doing the hit yourself in the head. How did I not see this? Right. Of course, it's all normal.
Mom guilt.
It's totally normal. And then you probably beat yourself up over that.
I sure did.
And probably still do sometimes. But what is it that you then focus on to get through that? Like, what was it during that moment that you said, all right, I got to think about this, to put one foot in front of the other and keep moving down this path?
So I did everything wrong.
But which is why you're an expert at it now.
Which is why I'm an expert now.
Right.
Absolutely everything wrong. I tell my clients, don't do this, don't do that. For one, he kept emailing me and, triggering me, trying to get me to attack him. I took the bait every time.
Yep.
Don't do that. I was crying all the time, trying to get my lawyer to react to him filing the motions, the constant motions against me. Don't do that. And then over time, like, I think we went through it for about 6 months. Toward the end of the 6 months, I started getting my strength back. I was seeing my trauma therapist. She was treating the PTSD, because a lot of what I was exhibiting were the signs and symptoms of PTSD, right? So once she started treating that, I could think more clearly, and then I could start to strategize. So I stopped responding with emotion to the emails. All right. I stopped responding to every single text message that he gave me, which was driving him crazy, because they want any kind of contact, whether it's positive or negative. That's supply for them.
Yep.
So I stopped doing those things. And then I was prepared to go to court, because I knew, based on my son's testimony, I was going to get full custody. So I was now in control of the situation. And then he started doing everything wrong. One of the things he did wrong was he decided to depose my son. Why would you depose the child that you were physically abusing? It made no sense.
He's a narcissist. So he thinks he's got one over on the drug.
Right.
Amazing. Wow. Just amazing.
Yes. So I deposed his girlfriend, and through deposing his girlfriend, she just dug a hole. I let her dig a hole for 2 hours, collecting evidence for me. And then I said, okay, so do you want to negotiate now on the child custody agreement? And he said, yes, let's negotiate.
That is so, some of the things, many of the stuff you're talking about is almost to the T of something I'm very familiar with. I mean, it's almost like it's incredible how close these cases are, because they all have to play through the same system. It's a marriage, there's legal stuff, there's this. So you can see it all play out almost exactly the same way every single time.
Yes.
I mean, that's absolutely incredible. So we're, like Greg said, we're going to post all of your stuff. And I know there's more. I just want to make sure I hit all of it. That if you're listening, you got to hit the episode details, and there's a link to the book and to your website and all that stuff, because this is it's huge. I wanted you to get on here and give us this perspective, and then I can sit here and take that and go, what would my buddy act like if I'm starting to think something's up? And you brought up those big ones of how you would behave when he's there, and that I'm gonna act one way in front of everyone while I'm kind of talking shit to you under my breath here in the corner.
Correct.
Like like a huge one. I've heard that now a dozen times from different people. Those little controlling things are wrong. They're absolutely wrong. That's terrible behavior. No one should be treated like that. And so seeing those things, you can see those now. Because again, like when I found out from my buddy, that was years ago, I was like, it was like a light bulb going off. It was like an epiphany, like, oh wow, like I get some of these stories I've heard before now I've seen it from my perspective. But if you've never seen that, right, you don't know. So now I can spot it a mile away, right, when someone's doing that. But it's difficult if you don't have that one-on-one experience. So like hearing all this stuff and how it works, I mean, it's incredible. And I just want to appreciate you sharing all this and putting it out there and helping other people. And it's got to be difficult when you're talking to that person, you reliving your own traumatic experiences. But in a way, I don't know, and the stuff that I've had to do, not in this stuff, but with guys who needed help, mental health issues after combat and stuff, it's the same thing, but you're helping them out.
But you're yeah. And
it helps you work through it sometimes too.
It does. I get the joy from hearing, when I tell people I get it, when they call me and they're like, I'm going through this and that, I'm like, I get it. Like I had the same experience. I just love hearing the sigh of relief in their voice, because
that's probably the first time they've heard that.
That's exactly right.
That's so good.
Yes. And I can tell them what's going to happen. I'm like, okay, X, Y, and Z is going to happen. And they'll come back to me 3 weeks later and they're like, you know what? You were right. He did exactly what you said. I said, because they all behave the same.
They have to. So, So one of the amazing things, Brian, that I found, Alana, when I went to your website and I'm poking around and taking a look at everything, you have a section on do it yourself. And Brian and I are huge on do it yourself. The reason is there's a bunch of charlatans in the human behavior business. So Brian came up with the idea, hey, let's do all our webinars free. And then, nobody will have to pay them for a crappy certificate after crappy training. So I like the idea that because, you're really good at what you do, so you got to charge money. It's your business. But tell us about the do-it-yourself. What can some people at home stand up on their own? How do they get started if they find out that they see these symptoms in their significant other?
Right. So the do-it-yourself courses, they're little YouTube videos. They're actually not done by me. They're done by a woman named Tina Swithin, and she'll walk you through how to deal with parental alienation, how to start doing your documentation, documenting the different incidents of abuse. Those are for the people that maybe they can't afford to pay me one-on-one, or they just want to see if they could do it on their own first. Now, what I always tell people when they ask me about those courses is, it's going to give you a high level overview. It's not going to be catered to your case.
Right.
So if you have a very unique situation, you'll probably be better off with the one-on-one, because it's going to be catered to your unique situation. You'll be able to take some of the tips from the online courses, but it's probably not going to help you to where you get to settlement.
No, and that's a good point, because a lot of it comes down to time, because I've had to deal with people before ask me, I was like, look, you have to document everything. Here's what you need to do. You create a journal, right? And you do, or on your calendar, every time one of those drop-offs, they say something, just write it up and document it. This is what they did. This is how I handled it. This is what happened. All those text messages, those emails, I go, you keep a journal. Say, when I talk to him, right? Because we're in a state, hey, you can't record that phone call without that other person knowing, but you can take notes on that call. That's stuff that is admissible because
in court,
it shows that you've kept a written documentation of it. They've done none of that. So it's not just your word against them. It's like, well, here on the 17th at 5 o'clock at night, he said this. And when I dropped him off here, look, I noticed that every single time we exchange the kids, you know, these three things happened and they're like, well, I don't have the time to do that. And I was like,
you have to. It's so important.
Yeah, I know.
Yes. And the other thing I tell my clients is, were your kids present? Because that's what family court cares about. He could battle you all day long and they not care about it. But if your kids were there and they had a certain demeanor before the abuse started and a different demeanor after the abuse started, all of that is critical documentation. Absolutely. It could swing your case one way or the other. So yes, you have to document.
And I know it's a pain in the ass, but that's who wins. Look, I mean, this is our pad just from this podcast. You get what I'm saying?
I got the same. I got a whole bunch of notes just from this episode.
We're always in that habit of writing things down. I take notes on phone calls that Greg and I have that are 5 minutes long that we really only passed a couple things, and there's no afterwards that I have to follow up on, but it's always like a note like, oh, this we covered or something, just because it's something to reference. We have documentation. We have to go back and go, oh crap, what was it that we said that time? Or what did we tell them we were going to do? And I have to go back through a yellow pad and be like, oh yeah, that's right. Here's what it is. But it's good because if you get in the habit of doing it, it's not as hard as you think. It doesn't have to be a novel. You're not writing a short story. It's just some bullet points every single time. Because guess what? 6 months of bullet points is a lot of bullet points.
Yes. Yeah. So, because you have to show the patterns of behavior.
Yep. Right.
Yes. And when you have 6 months or so of documentation, you can definitely show a clear pattern of behavior.
Absolutely. Amen. Well, Greg, I don't know. Did you have anything else you wanted to?
Yeah, here's my thing. It's coming up on the holidays, and the holidays are always a tough time for me. They were always rough at home. So for you single parents out there, I would say that being present is much better than buying a present. I would also say that if you're in trouble, reach out to Alana. She was easy to get a hold of.
Yeah.
She was easy to talk to. She's everywhere. So, and if she's not right for you, she'll tell you. She'll tell you where else that you can go. And it's, Alana, it's been a pleasure. It's been, to me, it's been an emotional roller coaster because Brian and I have been involved in situation from the perspective, that you represent.
They're so difficult.
It's just horrible, and especially during the holiday.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm going to have all the links up in the episode details and get that out as much as I can, because I feel like there's going to be some people that just click on your website and go, yes, I knew it. You know what I mean? They're going to read it, just reading what you have on there and go, you know what? Damn it. I was right. And they're going to have, I mean, it's just that epiphany moment, I think, sometimes. And so I appreciate you for coming on, Alana. I'll always want to give the last word to you of anything you want to say to our listeners or whoever this podcast gets in front of.
Yeah. So I want to say to anyone that's currently in the situation or in the middle of getting out of the situation, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You will survive this and you will come out stronger. I didn't even realize how good my life was going to be after I left my marriage. That's why I stayed in it for so long. Because I'm like, oh, I can't survive on my own. I'm surviving. I'm thriving. You can too. So don't feel like you're stuck in a bad situation. Get yourself out.
Well,
can you imagine an hour went by?
I know.
We've having such fun. It's like I looked up at the clock and I go, oh my gosh, we got to have you back on.
I know.
It's fun.
Hopefully you're going to get some business out of this podcast, at least from who I send it to. Hopefully they pick up the phone and call you because they need it. But I do appreciate your time on you giving us your time, Alana, and sharing this stuff and just getting it out there. It fits in a very specific context of what we talk about in general about human behavior, and then how to identify these little things. And we always tell people, for the most part, just trust your gut. If something feels off, it's off. Now, You may not know what it is that's off. They might not be a narcissist. Maybe they just had something horrible happen to them or whatever. Like, you don't know, but if something feels off, investigate it.
And if it happens once, it's not a disorder. So I don't want people duking it out.
Exactly. Yes. You have to have multiple incidents.
Yes. It's a good
revealing episode.
Yeah. And we do appreciate it. So thanks everyone for listening. Check out the episode details and thanks for tuning in. Have a wonderful and safe Christmas. This is getting released a couple days before Christmas. So hopefully you're having a good time with family and friends and everything. And please don't forget that training changes behavior.